Welcome back to Music Theory Logic. Andrew here, and today I thought it'd be fun and practical for my workflow to build some sounds in SERUM. Not exactly sure what we'll end up making, but I will put it in the description. So if you're seeing the description, you already know what's going to happen. Let's go ahead into the logic session. So to begin, if we're going to sound design, so I have an instance of SERUM loaded up here. I have the BPM at 120. We could put it up to 140 since when I'm producing a lot of electronic music, that's kind of like my bass tempo for the halftime sort of step kind of rhythm that I like to go for. So let's just start and see what happens. So in order to know what this sounds like, which is not going to be very good from the beginning, I'm going to want to load in some MIDI here. So let me start with a really simple yet fun sound to build. We're going to build, I guess, like an uplifter. So the simplest thing I could do is I could take my LFO, turn this to 4 bars. That's how long this takes. Could slope it up. I could turn off my main oscillator. I could have be key tracking via pitch. I could take the volume of that noise oscillator and raise it up and perhaps raise the pitch in some parameter. Cool, let's hear that. Cool, so for a bunch of different applications, you can use that. It's kind of like creating a reverse. I could do it faster, like one measure. Cool, now let's add to that. What if I take my oscillator and I increase the volume as we go? Could also cool, I could filter that oscillator a lot. Then this is where it gets really fun. We can start to play around with effects parameters. So I could use the same LFO to like make this feel like it's using the dimension expander, but I could also take advantage of a secondary LFO to perhaps, let's say we use the distortion, have it fully on, but I automate this drive. So let's take the first one back to 4 bars and hear that. So now we get that movement. Compressing all of that sound could be helpful. Now, one thing I could do to sort of accentuate the sound of it going up, I could find a pitch. And perhaps tie this LFO to the frequency. I'm going to want to go slow. Let's see, what else could I do? I can really get creative if I start filtering it again, but with the second LFO. Really starts to wobble. Depending upon the kind of music you're making, you may not need that. So when you're done building a sound, I always like to save it. I'm going to save in my basic folder, just basic uplifter. Cool. So let's create some MIDI with some more interesting things happening. So I'm going to mute this original channel and let's do something for kind of like an arpeggio sequence. I'm going to write in individual notes. Now we're not going to hear this, or since I have that same SERUM patch, I would have to go back to my initial preset, which I've done. All right, so simple G minor arpeggio. Take it to the E flat. Cool. So the key of G minor, basically a G minor chord, an E flat major, and then a D7, which would make that harmonic minor. So let's go ahead into SERUM and let's have some fun. So let's use an analog. How about JNP? Very 8-bit sound to it. Let's grab basic shapes. Cool, let's use LFO1 to really shape the decay or the release. So I'll turn that to envelope mode. Let's tie that to the volumes of these oscillators, trying to mimic the top volume that I had. Cool. One really fun thing I like to do is take the reverb, take a secondary LFO to the mix of that. We can really make this start to sound trippy by sort of using our delay. Cool. So one fun thing to do when I'm done building a sound like this is I like to assign macros. This is somewhat new. So I'm going to tie that to the FM on oscillator A. I'm going to then bring up a distortion, and I'm going to, let's see here. I will partially tie the drive to that, and then I'm fully going to tie the mix to that knob. All right, so now the FM further. Add kind of a fundamental back in. And I could save this like quarter arp. So I know that anytime I put like a quarter note arpeggio into here, it will work. So if I were to change my pattern entirely, what if we went down, keeping it in G minor? All right, cool. So let's go back to this. All right, I'll create one more to kind of work with that. I'm going to go back to an initial preset. This has to be like my favorite sound there is to build a bass. So I guess before I get the sounds in there, let's just choose a G. A G, a G, an E flat, a D. All right, so if I come back in here, initial preset, we've got our sub, let's turn off. So that's really low. We can do that. Let's add our analog bass drum sign. So we can build like a pretty cool sub just with a couple oscillators. But the fun part here is we can actually create some movement. So let's say we want a steady quarter note. So on, off, I'm going to apply this again to the volumes. Guess we're not even using the noise oscillator yet. Now this is something that I learned somewhat recently how to do. Well, with a macro, I think I can do this. Apply it to the rate, okay. So we can change the speed of that. Now, if I turn on our dotted rhythms and triplets, we'll get more options between. Now, what we might want to do is slightly curve this line. So already got the steady quarter note feel. Now, if you don't know how to do something inside a SERUM, like if it's not working, tying things together, this is usually in the actual matrix where you can find other things. So let's say I want to have my macro 2 control the entire pitch. So I can go to global master tune. Doesn't do anything if I tell it how much. Say we want it to go up. So it's kind of a fun technique because we're getting a lot of dissonant stuff that's not even in the key. Let's say. Now it's a little low for what I was just trying to do if I put it up an octave. So let's say you want to make something like that in Logic or Ableton or FL Studio. You're going to record your movement. So I'm going to go to touch on this synth, and I'm going to record that. All right, let's just say I like that, which don't necessarily do, but it's gonna sound super trippy. So if I take something like this and just literally put it through a guitar amp, it's gonna sound like it's coming through a speaker. If I use LFO tool to bring our 8th note back, so it's kind of like having an additional LFO you can use. So I'm gonna go for a similar shape. Let's see, how do I do this? To what we had before. So if I go back in with the bass, but I delete my automation layer. So you hit A to find this in Logic, drag it all to the left, and then double click. That'll get rid of it. Let's unmute that, make sure it's turned down. Now we got some really weird sounds on that last thing. I think my computer can handle this. So let's build one last sound for this session. So I'm going to go back to an initial preset. Now I had talked about using the sampler, using SERUM like a sampler. So let's see here, cancel. Just want to chop up this one. So I'm going to grab like this hit. All right, so I could instantly bring it into SERUM by going File, so I don't think I can actually turn that in. So I would go to File, locate SERUM presets folder, go to Noises, User, put this in, but the problem is this is inside, so without bouncing down a wave, I'm not going to be able to do that. What I can do is drag this. Can I drag that in? No. All right, so scratch that. Let's take this. Let's bounce it in place. And then let me take the one that we bounced and send it out of the computer to a waveform, and we could call this sound demo trippy. All right, then if I go into that, I think it was desktop, sound demo trippy. All right, so if I come into this SERUM preset, I can go File, show SERUM preset folder, go to Noises, User, and then I'm just going to literally drag this into here. All right, now while I'm in this window, I'm going to drag this onto our oscillator. So this is importing a wavetable. We're going to have to edit that quite a bit. So then finally, to get that all to show up, I'm going to go to rescan folders on disk. It's going to do it. So then I can turn on this noise, and I have the sound trippy demo. So to recap what I showed you how to do with SERUM, if I take this patch of SERUM, I'm now triggering the clip that we just had before. So let me make sure I'm turned on. That's just really turned down. So I could crank it. Now, notice I'm not hearing any pitch change. If I turn on key tracking, we will. So I could come back in, and actually I could take my arpeggio MIDI and I could have this trippy sound playing our arpeggio. Now, important side note, it's not necessarily in pitch. Although it does sound like it. All right, so let's say we want to sample in an even crazier way. I can take this patch that we have, and let's turn off this one. Let's turn on our oscillator A, and this is where I dragged that MIDI clip in. Now, there's a couple ways to do that. If I go back to this one and I drag it in and hover, you'll see there's import normal, import dynamic pitch follow, import constant frame size. pitch average, and that's what we're going to do. All right. Then we're going to hit the pencil to come in here and to edit these. And we can go through and find where our sound ended. It ended right here, and I can hit add, remove, selected to the end. Let me make sure. So right here, remove, selected to end. All right, cool. Then we can do like process, normalize each so they're similar volume. We could let's see here, another morph. We could add a crossfade. Then we could get out of this, and there it is on our wavetable. So if I come back, let's get rid of that MIDI that we had, and if I use just the held out notes, let's turn it down. Let's go down an octave. So we could grab a harmonic like that, not actually use the synth, use a basic default waveform, and then do FM from A. We could kind of make that into a growl of sorts by just going into our main filter. So I was really mesmerized by sounds like this when I first started building sounds, but you can create a lot of really gritty stuff through FM synthesis, through importing wavetables, doing things incorrectly. Sometimes that'll lead to really cool advancements. So, and we didn't really even add any effects in there. I could exaggerate stuff that's going on by maybe dimension expanding as our filter goes. We can also get really hectic with the with distortions. We can go to downsample. And then tie that to the mix. Cool. So really, we can build all sorts of sounds with that. I'm glad I got 4 in there. Let me make sure I save this. When you save your sounds, you can use whatever makes sense to you. I usually do the kind, so like a bass, a growl, and then I might give some sort of like harmonics. All right, cool. So hopefully you found that helpful. If you did, you would help me out a lot by subscribing to the channel. I put out a lot of content like this twice a week, also with shorts. If you have any questions or specific things you want me to cover, leave a comment down there. Once again, this was sort of an aimless sound design session, but it's really important if you're making electronic music and you're trying to have unique sounds, spend some sessions just messing around with synths, trying to build sounds that you find are interesting, and then use those sounds in a separate session to actually make the music. That's at least what works for me and a lot of my mentors or other producers I look up to, whether I've heard that from them in person or via channels like Future Music. So have a wonderful day. Thank you for hanging out, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.